Hi, everyone. Just wanted to let you know we are recording and live streamed on YouTube. We'll give everybody 7 more minutes to join. See you soon. Hey, everyone. We'll give people a couple more minutes. As people start to come in, and then we'll unmute ourselves again.
Anna, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Let me ask you a simple but very important question. Are you running this meeting?
Sorry, Jack, say that again.
Are you running this meeting?
Yes, give me just 1 minute. I was letting other people come in. Just trying to run that.
We hadn't talked about that this afternoon, so I just wanted to be sure that you weren't counting on me to run the meeting.
Oh, nope. Give me just 1 minute. I'll let a couple more people in, and then I'll kick it off.
No, you take over. I'm good.
Hey, guys, I'm over my IT issues, I think.
All right, it looks like we have everybody who should be here and a couple extra people as well. Can you hear me okay? I was trying to adjust my headphones. Okay, great. Thank you all for joining remotely and on short notice. Hopefully everyone's commutes or non-commutes were okay today. As we said in previous emails, this is supposed to be a pretty informal, discussion-driven meeting. There's no agenda, there's no consultants present. It's really just the zoning update committee talking through any kind of issues that have persisted through the previous monthly meetings. Some of the prompts from Andres, who would love to give us homework, included the zoning map update that was updated in January, and he sent that out to everybody. The area and bulk tables and the full townwide standards. And then he also sent a proposed field visit support table, which we can talk through to look through different kinds of density in the existing different kinds of density. What did he? I'm just looking at it right now. So there are kind of example districts or areas to walk through or discuss when we think about the Balkan area tables. So with that, that's about as much kind of leading as I'll do. As I said a couple times, we are recording and live streaming. So, you know, just be aware of that. If anyone in the public would like to speak, you know, this is kind of a committee discussion, but feel free to raise your hand and we can maybe allow for some public comment as well. Does anybody want to kick us off? This is the downside of virtual.
I'll throw
Do
something
round
out
robin
there, I
if you want.
guess. I'll help you. I'll throw you a lifeline, Anna.
Thanks, Jeff.
You
ahead.
got it. I do forget. I think MJ couldn't make it this month, and I kind of agreed. I feel like it's a little bit of a start and stop momentum on this process a little bit. So I'm glad we are together, but I'm not sure what our overall goal is tonight, if it's to really get into technical details with them or if it's just a general conversation. I think we're all anxious to get this done. I think the original goal has passed, and I think we're resetting a new goal. So I'm not sure how best to move forward tonight.
A quick speak to one of those questions. So the intent, which we discussed in December at our meeting, was that MJ would focus their energy and my energy, and then also we're pulling in Matt and Joe Slater, those of you who don't know, is the attorney to the planning board. We'll be focusing on the subdivision committee, or I'm sorry, subdivision regulations. And we'll actually be discussing that on Thursday, just to try to get through the nitty gritty of basically the legality, because those are much older than our current zoning regulations. Those are, I believe, from the 90s, our subdivision regs. So that's where MJ's focus is, and that's why they're not part of this meeting.
Yeah, and just to build on that, my notes, I have that as a group, we were not planning on going over townwide section 3. And that's why we wanted to meet this week, so that we could put some attention and put some eyes on it and make some suggestions, rather than doing it as homework, because that may not be the most effective way to communicate. So maybe that's the place to start, Anna, is if we pull up that document and begin with that one and talk about our thoughts on possible revisions to that.
Sure, I can certainly do that.
Anna, let me say something real quick.
Yeah, please.
Anna, Colleen, and I met with MJ, to Jeff's point. This is not going fast enough. At some point about 6 months ago, MJ either got too busy or some of the principals got too busy. So we've had several meetings where we've just, kind of read them the riot act, said this should have been done by now. So right now, I wanted to do this meeting, besides the point Tina brought up, I wanted to do it because we got to keep moving. We got to finish this thing up. You know, it's almost pencils down, and we haven't had enough discussion. So with that, Tina, let's go the way you suggested.
Anna, do you want to share your screen or, and then we can all be on the
Yeah,
same
I-
page? Or do you
I
want
was
me to?
just pulling it up. I have to have Zoom in one screen and the remote in another, so I can definitely pull up what we've gone through so far. Has anyone had a chance to look through at all in the very slow month of end of December, beginning of January?
I can throw it out there a little bit, and two of the things that I don't know that we tackle well that I would like to see us address in a new write-up is demolition standards. You know, clean up on some of these sites when buildings get demolished, that there's a restoration. I think the old Hess station went really well on Becker's property. Building came down, grass went in. The site looks well. We've had other sites around town that I believe that had orange barrels and or orange fence up for many, many, many years, including, I think there's a foundation down off of Albany Place that's been exposed for years. So stuff like that, I think we can tighten up. And then I'd also like to work on, and this might come as part of the subdivision, I'm not sure, but the CO certificate of occupancy standards we follow too, to try and work in some final inspection and or bonding. I think we talked about that last time. I think Josh brought something up from Saratoga that they do, or Colony, and tighten that up, that developers aren't off the hook because they're always pressing us. We always get the, I don't want to call it political pressure, but we get the pressure from the developers to get their CO when they might not have their site completely done, and trying to be business friendly, and we work with them, and then sometimes we get stuck not getting things done.
Sure.
Can you hear is my microphone working? I was having audio issues earlier. Okay, thank you. Yeah, one of the things I think that's important is establishing a lot of that information at the outset prior to issuing a building permit. It's difficult if you don't have any of that reinforcement, you know, as it comes time for CO. So having all of that paperwork established, the protocol, it should be the same thing for every project. They fill out the same information. It's broken down. It's, you know, well documented. And then when it comes time, you just go kind of block by block. But before that building permit is even issued, all that paperwork is in. Everyone at the town level has agreed that it's, you know, appropriate. And then you move forward from there.
Okay, I can go ahead and share the proposed townwide standards for section 3, if that would be helpful to pull up on the screen.
Looks good.
Let me share this. It's a little bit bigger.
Yeah, we touched on landscaping quite a bit last time, right?
Yes, that was the section we had gone through. We went through landscape, and then there was a tiny bit of signage at the end of that section. And we went through. Hold on, I'm getting out. Yeah, so we went through landscaping. This is the section they
Yeah, and I know at the time we had the discussion about how we can kind of put a lot of language in there emphasizing the use of native plants in landscaping. And I think that will apply in section 3.1 with the parking as well, since there are quite a few portions of that describe the landscaping in parking lots and things like that.
So we went through landscaping, recommended design practices, performance standards. Those were what was outlined for the December section 3 townwide standard discussion. If anybody's gone through and looked at sections that you think would be helpful to have more in-depth discussion about, you know, again, this wasn't a prepared agenda. This is really supposed to be discussion focused. So if there's sections that stand out to you, that you have questions about.
Can
I'd be
you
interested
guys,
to hear people's opinion on signs.
Yeah, that's a big one.
let's see, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay, there we go. Just-
Yeah.
I
if you want
may
to
have only
jump-
been nodding my head before, Victoria, when you were talking about
Okay.
native plantings.
Likewise.
So then signs, I did have a couple notes that I made about that. I know that we briefly mentioned when we were talking about lighting before, how in signage they're at 4.36B. There is mention of prohibiting LED signs, so that doesn't really make any sense anymore. But I also noticed that there's the prohibition of like animated and electronic signs, which makes sense because they can be a nuisance, but I feel like I see them frequently. So I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah. I think you must have driven by the new nuisance in town at the Rensselaer County's building.
Just
and
gonna
been
say that.
blinded by the lighting at night. So, which is a separate issue, but we have held a pretty good standard about not allowing changeable message signs in town. And I think Colony is trying to react to the fact that they were allowing them and now they're regretting it because it has become a proliferation of them and they do become kind of a nuisance visually. So we did talk about LED lighting technology inside a typical sign. Box sign is fine, but the LED as in a changeable message sign, still trying to prohibit them townwide. The school district probably snuck theirs in on Route 4 at Genet. There's definitely been case law that is not necessarily allowed. The county would probably be another story that they could claim it's on county property, so they might be exempt from the zoning regulations on their own property. Would be a harder challenge, and the fire districts are another one that seem to have slipped in. But beyond that, I do feel strongly we should continue to prohibit those signs. And any ones that do come in for whatever exemption they want to claim definitely should have to tone them down at night. That one in front of the county office building is very bright.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I drove on Central Ave recently, and the thought that crossed my mind was how much I don't want 9 and 20 to be Central Ave.
Right.
Yeah, I would agree with this too.
Yeah, the story behind the one at the school was that they made a deal with the town. This was before Tina and I were here. And it was supposed to be used for community. And it was going to be the one sign was the explanation. So, but several times in the past, we tried to get community messages there and they weren't having it. So, but that was the conversation that got that approved.
Gotcha. And as far as that too, I remember I provided some written comments months ago when we first started the process on signs too. I'm sure MJ can resurrect those comments, but banner signs should also be addressed again, and maybe a temporary limit. The other new one that I don't remember if I submitted or not is for leasing signs. We have some commercial properties in town that are perpetually always up for lease for new tenants. So it would be nice to, I know we're going to wind up with First Amendment issues, but maybe a temporary, a duration, as long as a sign can be put onto a property for no more than a month at a time and no more than twice a year or something like that, to try and keep some of these unsightly for lease signs that are constantly up would be good.
Yeah,
I
and
did want to, oh, sorry, I just want to scroll down to the temporary sign, just to respond, Jeff, quick. We do have a limit for, for example, for election related signs, that matter. Go ahead,
speaking
Tina.
of elections, though, we have to adjust that because now with early voting, that bumps things up 10 days. So we have to adjust the dates for that. And then the other thing is those temporary like windsock signs that
Yeah.
businesses put out too. Those have to be addressed.
The other piece of this is, we did ask MJ to try and see if there's some kind of new model language that we can mimic that's been through the court systems, because I know there's a lot of First Amendment issues as it comes to freedom of speech and what content is we can regulate and how to regulate it. We also have I-90 that cuts through town, so however we can also help address any billboards that may pop up along properties of I-90 would be good. And would like to see us address flags that have been used to make statements on certain properties, including 10 to 12 flags at a time on the property. Would be good to maybe try and roll into this sign code also.
Yeah, those seem like great ideas.
Yeah, Jeff, that last one, that could be a fight. I mean,
What's
there's
that?
like having 10 or 12 flags, the guy on Route 4 is pretty combative about his First Amendment rights.
Yep.
The political issue is, Tina's right about the timing, but look, if somebody put a lot of money in it and challenged that in court, it would never hold up. But what it does, if you remember, is politicians used to litter this town.
Yeah.
There were the corner by Ridge Road on Columbia Turnpike. There would be 100 signs. They'd be 20 of one person's name. And then every party would be mixed in. The whole town looked like crap. And so the political sign stuff was put in there. And I see it as kind of a finger in the dike, but at least it holds back, it creates some order out of it, and it gives code enforcement, especially after election. We wait a week and then anything we see, we grab.
Yeah, I think the last decade of political science has been much better than it historically had ever been. So I think the code works well from that aspect. And, yep.
I do too.
Yep. Agreed.
Although it's indefensible. People have a right to speak their mind.
Yeah,
If we were to like not necessarily American flags, but just flags in general, or purely American flags.
Well, and that's where the First Amendment comes in. We can't really regulate what type of flag, but we can limit the number of flags. So, you can prohibit a property owner from placing X amount of signs on their property, but it has to be content neutral. And that's the term, is content neutral. We can't single out political signs or school signs or charity signs. It's just got to be signs, period. Content neutral is the key. The other piece for consideration is I'd like to open the code up a little bit more to plazas like Rensselaer County Plaza, Hannaford Plaza, Price Chopper, Market 32 over there on 9 and 20 of allowing multi-tenant monument signs. I think our current code kind of prohibits having a big sign out front with 10 or 20 tenant names on it, which I think is a little foolish. I think it was wishful thinking when the code was written. I don't think they look bad if they're done right, in my opinion. So I want to throw that out there and try and maybe come up with a way if a plaza has more than X tenants, or can at least come up with any plaza can have a sign with multi-tenant monument signs.
And I think it's page 15, what he's talking about.
Thank you. I was
Yeah.
gonna start Control F. Yeah,
Sorry.
it is
Yeah.
a really interesting thing, and for context for people that don't maybe deal with it every day. As you are probably well aware now, 9 and 20 is split up B1, B2, and sometimes kind of choppy ways. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, monument signs are allowed in either B1 or B2 and not in the other. So you think about the land use being very similar, but not allowing for signs with multiple tenants. Page 15.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're only allowed where 2 or more tenants are located 80 feet or further from the edge of the road.
Multi-tenant.
Yeah.
That's a building.
Yeah, within the B2, it's like this third sentence down on the top of that page that prohibits having the name of individual businesses or other information is not permitted.
Right, so you could say, for example, Peter Harris Plaza, but not Peter Harris Plaza, which includes these 4 tenants. You don't be able to state for one item.
Agreed. And almost every one of these plazas, that's just common practice. I don't think they look bad if they're done right. If we have architectural standards.
Sure.
Anna, can you scroll to page 16, 334D?
Flags and insignia.
Yeah. Any thoughts from anyone on this? Phrasing?
You're talking about bullet B,
Yeah.
as in boy?
D as a
He
dog.
is in dog, I believe.
thank-
Yeah.
Maybe it just hasn't been enforced.
Tina, what do you think? Why'd you bring that up?
Well, because we've been talking about flags a little bit here tonight, and is this what people are looking for? Does this need to be beefed up? Does it need to be revised? What are we thinking would be most effective to attain the look and feel that we're looking to attain?
Well, that's interesting because our former friend, Mr. Fusillo, violated that 6 foot by 10 foot rule without a variance.
Yeah,
That issue was raised. And I mean, it speaks to what we've been kind of dancing around, is obviously putting any kind of limitation on display of the American flag, especially and specifically, can really immediately ruffle feathers.
Yeah.
Yeah, they kept referencing the, I believe it was the American Flag Act or something that said you specifically could not prohibit or limit the size of the American flag to be displayed.
Yeah. I
yeah,
think there's-
we've had a couple of issues with the American flag. There are people who watch what goes up outside of town hall when
Mhm.
something's put to half mast. When we decided to put the Ukrainian flag up there, I heard from a number of people who expressed sympathy with the expression, but disagreed with the protocol. People get really serious about this stuff.
Yeah, there's some common legal disclaimer, right? We could maybe add unless allowed by other statute or something like that. So it would just
Yeah.
let them prove the other statute and then it's allowed.
Well, when Fusillo's rebuilt, they put up a flag that violated this clause, and so Adam got in touch with them. And the guy who was running the show sent me the nastiest email. He said, "I will have you on the nightly news by 6 p.m. tonight." if you're coming after my flag. And, you know, put in those terms, what were we supposed to do? Well, there's a huge flag.
Now, I'm wondering if you can regulate the height of the flagpole, right? I wonder if that gets
I
around
think
it.
so. I think they violated that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I guess it does kind of call into question, is it chicken or egg? If
Yeah.
if we're not calling into question the size, or if there's pushback on calling the size of the flag itself. But without being the engineer in the room, you know, I assume a certain size flag would do better on a certain size pole. You know, we're kind of inherently limiting it either way. But if it's being not followed to the rule, regardless, I don't know which one's easier to go after.
Yeah. So you're right, Tina, as far as my example on Route 4, I would think it's a code violation again. Right? Any property owner is allowed to have flags, content neutral, doesn't say what type of flags, and insignia of any government, provided that you have no more than 3. It seems pretty straightforward there. I didn't realize it was in there.
I mean, I think, you know, what we're seeing too is that this code is lengthy and complex, and there's a lot here to cover. I think J is interesting, considering that sometimes we've had our supervisor the target of a lawn sign.
Yeah, that was fun. Yeah, you know, on crisscrossing, there's this young guy who basically is running several businesses out of the home. Kevin's been after this kid for 2 years. His neighbors go nuts. And when we looked into it, one of the things this guy did was he put a sign in his front yard that said, "Honk if your neighbors are assholes too." Now, provocative, not the strategic move you want to make if you live in a neighborhood. And it just made things worse. But what do you do with a sign like that?
Jeff, to your earlier point too, I just wanted to point out letter L, temporary non-limited for sale real estate signs. If that's something to be expanded on, it does kind of limit residential versus business or commercial district, some size limitation.
Yeah, it just does, I guess, just doesn't have a duration. And you run into the issue where, it's perpetually under for lease. And you got to
Yeah, like right in front of Hanford Plaza.
Yeah, it's been there for, say, years.
Yeah, they might have changed it when it wasn't Gordon Brothers anymore. It used to say Jeff Gordon forever, but there's still one there with the new owner.
Well, those types of signs, and for example, the example that Jack gave of the neighbor issue, and then those windsock signs that say, open or sale. I mean, maybe that's the gap in this law is that we need to address.
And like you said, this is discussion based. We don't have to solve it. That's what MJ's for, I guess.
Yeah, if we could bring that back to them, Anna. And then just for discussion with the P regarding the election signs, it had been 6 weeks prior to the first Tuesday in November following the first Monday. But now with those 10 days, do we want to, does this group think it should still be 6 weeks prior to early voting? Or do you think that that should be adjusted? And we also have to account for primaries too, because primaries have early voting as well.
Yeah, I think some language just needs to be inserted to specify that early voting is the event. that election day itself is not the event, because that's the pushback we get from campaigns, that it's, we can put our signs out basically whenever we want, but they will say 6 weeks prior to early voting. So it gives them another 10 days, basically.
And we want to say early voting for election and primary, correct?
Yeah, I think so. And the same rule of 7 days after the event, because that drives me insane, because these are people who are, asking for your support to be civic leaders, and then they leave that stuff all over the place, as if they don't care how the place looks.
Right.
So yeah, I think, Tina, with that, we'll find the right language, but I think that's the issue. Specify early voting and specify the primary.
And Jack, to your point, I think section 3.3.5 took care of the political signs out in the public right of ways.
Yes. Yeah. You know what we do, though? We pick up any signs that are in the town's right of way, we pick up during campaigns, and we offer them back to the campaigns. But the week after an election, if after 7 days, if your signs are out, they're going to the transfer station. So,
Yeah, I would have a nice lost and found dumpster at DPW to throw them in and let people come grab them, or they go.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, during a campaign, we give them back. Those things are expensive, but
Yeah,
we give
they
them
can
back
come pick
things.
up.
Please don't put them in where you put them.
So Anna, where is the text regarding the illuminated signs, such as the one in front of the administrative offices and now in front of the county office? Because maybe that needs to be strengthened so that it isn't a seek forgiveness anymore, that it is ask permission.
I believe it's in a couple different places. So there's, to me, slightly confusing or vague language under the prohibited sign. Electronic reader board, animated moving. We have language about cabinet box, internally lit cabinet box.
I just want to interject that there is one resource that might help the town move forward a little bit with this. The New York State Department of State Division of Local Government Services has a technical theories document that is available online called Municipal Control of Signs. They have part 1 and part 2 in the document. Part 1 is the legal aspect of sign regulation, and part 2 is developing sign regulations. And they kind of go about how to create purposes and procedures for making specific provisions within a sign regulation that will abide by law.
Cool.
Thanks, Adam.
Adam, is that a publication date? I'm looking right now online. Is that a publication date of 2000, reprint September 2021? That must be the most recent, right?
Yeah. Published originally in 2006, and then it was revived in 2015 and reprinted 2021. So it's been looked at recently.
I just put the link in that chat. Anybody wants to grab it?
Thank you, Tina.
Other than that, I don't have any other sign issues.
Did you want to look more in depth at these, either the sign lighting section or the prohibited sign section?
It's just, I did want to point out if you scroll up just a pinch at there we go, at the 3.39 sign lighting.
Yep.
There's the line that lighting must be generally white or of a muted color. I was wondering if maybe we could put some language in there where it would be generally warm white, just when you get to the more warm white and especially yellow and amber tones of any type of lighting, there is an dramatically decreased disturbance to insects. So that just might be a nice way to influence that. You know, we don't need to attract more insects to signage or storefronts or anything like that, let alone disturb their patterns.
Is there kind of a similar resource or document to point to, similar to the dark sky standard? Is there something that's kind of like lighting that's good for outdoor settings that isn't
I
intrusive?
know there
something we could
is,
point
but
to?
I don't know the details off the top of my head, but I'd be happy to find that out for you.
Yeah, that might be helpful just to point to as a resource, you know,
Sure.
when discussing it with applicants.
Great.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Is MJ going through an exercise at all to identify terms that might not be clearly defined? Like temporary, like one temporary sign. There's not a definition for temporary in the index. Or there's another one about roadside agricultural, one temporary sign for roadside stand selling agricultural produce. Like, how do you define a roadside stand? Maybe I'm overthinking this.
I would say things have come up both when we went through the definition section as a group, and then separately internally. And then as we worked through other sections, we kind of were like, well, that's not defined, or in internal sessions, and just, you know, kind of relevant to the sign section. We have met internally with MJ and with the building codes department to talk through regular kind of problem sections, things that would be helpful to have more refined or defined. So I think that's very helpful to bring up.
And I
different-
think what we should formalize what Matt said. We should tell MJ we would like that kind of review. You know, have Andres or somebody systematically go through the terminology. I think that's a good idea.
So like some sections will say temporary, and then they'll outline a time period, you know, like the election signs, 7 days after, 6 weeks before. That makes sense, but 334L, temporary non-illuminated real estate signs, doesn't have a time frame.
Yeah.
So just a little bit inconsistent. So like, you know, what does that word mean? Because it's very important.
I am nodding my head and taking notes. Any other kind of standout sections in the sign?
It was okay.
Nope.
Not hearing anyone jump up. Is there another section we should move to? I think parking was mentioned previously, or we can dive into some fun standards for individual use.
Just roll in order, Anna.
Into design standards. That one we discussed, I believe. Hold
Yep.
on. Recommended design practices. Performance standards. This one we discussed in our December meeting, and we had kind of notes to expand some sections, bring in more complete streets talk, kind of refine that K, talk about kind of more updated green infrastructure ideas. And likewise, performance standards. There's not a ton to really go into there. We just need to make sure that that syncs up with other noise ordinances on the books, and any kind of updated standards.
Yep.
So
Yeah,
standards
and
for
I think in
individually.
December, Jeff recommended I ask the planning board, but I haven't done that yet. So I will bring that up tomorrow or Wednesday.
Okay, I'll make a note to us to bring that up.
Cool.
Good. For recommend just. All right. So standards for individual uses, this is where, I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory, but it's where we're getting into the more detailed restrictions or limitations or requirements, regulations for uses that may have more inherent nuisance or perceived nuisance, whether that's noise, odor, or any kind of perceived nuisance. Some I think are pretty standardized. Some might be a little more nuanced or up for discussion. So if there's one that jumps out at you, Jeff.
Yep, back up at 3.7.3.
Yep.
I think this is where it would get into garages, automobile repair garages. And I think we need to require a clearly delineated site plan for storage of vehicles. I think we had the issue by Cows Corners where the entire building started to become engulfed in storage vehicles. And we're having the same issue right now outside the front door of Regeneron on 9 and 20, where the side yard is getting filled up with vehicles that he can't fix right away or for whatever other reason, including, I believe, is probably encroaching on town property. So
I would say also that car dealer between Hoffman's and Stewart's on 9 and 20.
Oh,
They have
Broadway.
pretty packed in there.
Used to be Broadway, yeah. Yep. Yeah, it worked out really well when we had the issue with Michael's Auto Plaza back in the day. Spent many years, I think, going back and forth, and then he finally came in with a clearly delineated site plan showing where he could display vehicles. And I'll tell you, for the last 2 years, I don't think he's parked a car outside of those areas in front of that or alongside that building. He's done a really nice job.
It's shocking.
Yes.
The problem, Jeff, is that situation on Route 4 is now at 278 Elliott Road.
I see it. Yep.
That's where that guy took everything when he was thrown out.
Yeah. But yeah, that's we have good shops and we have poor shops in town, and it's the new tenant that took over his old spot has done a really nice job. It looks much cleaner, and he's operating a garage there without the mess that he had. So it just happens to be an issue. I think it's just natural to the business. It's a side effect of the business. People leave their cars there for months at a time because they can't pay the bill or whatever, but we have to find a better way to present those properties.
Agreed.
And they're not supposed to be displaying any vehicles in the front areas. Is that what this is saying? Outdoor storage or display of vehicles or boats shall be permitted only in the side or rear yards. So there's supposed to be nothing in the front.
Yeah, that's an interesting one because that really doesn't fly with any car sales place.
Right.
Yeah.
And that wasn't even the issue with some of these dealerships. It was that they were just encroaching on the road or kind of haphazardly displaying the cars.
Yeah, I think, Matt, you guys did a nice job with the new Cusilla building. We asked them, we said, look, we know you're going to want to display vehicles in front of the building, delineate where you're going to park them. We'll sign off on it. And then we have something we can enforce down the road. And I think that property's worked out really well since it went in.
That's why we forgot about the flagpole.
Josh, to your point / question, I wonder how much of this is pre-existing non-conforming or grandfathered. yes, this code is old, but the auto sales or that as a precedent of use may be older. So it's possible some of that is kind of let slide.
Yeah, just, is there some language that should be added in there? Like I said, to define allowable, placement of vehicles at the front, as determined by the planning board or something to that effect.
Yeah, I think permitted storage area of vehicles shall be delineated on a site plan. Because we already say they're not supposed to encroach on any of the required yard areas, so if they're delineated on the site plan, it's clear for code enforcement to go on site and start citing them.
Yep.
3734, is it common for car dealers to even have gas pumps anymore?
I think that might be the leasing and rental aspect.
Yeah. No, they don't typically include them.
Yeah.
There's car charging stations now.
Yeah.
That's actually a good point. I don't know if the code needs to address electric vehicle charging in the code or not.
That's
I mean,
something
probably.
yeah, it's something we've raised. And I think Jeff, you previously sent, I forget who put it out, if it was a federal, maybe FHA or some kind of federal transportation organization that put out standards for parking to include charging stations. So we
Yeah,
have included
accessible.
that. I think we probably mention it in the parking section. I'm not sure if we would need it in the standards for individual use, since it is typically an accessory or kind of an accessory use and somewhat minimal impact, but can definitely include some.
I mean,
language in
that row of charging stations kind of popped up in Hannaford Plaza.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was just a building permit or what that was.
there. I am also not sure. It obviously wasn't
But
planning or zoning.
yeah, but I don't like. Maybe there should be requirements for additional parking at charging stations, right? I mean, if it takes a half hour or 15 minutes to charge a car, there might be a queue. Stuff like that needs to be considered.
Yeah, so I guess I'm wondering if that does fit more into the parking section. Or it could be referenced.
Yep.
Kind of underneath one of these items.
I think as like Adam mentioned, I would imagine the Department of State or somebody like that has some guidelines. MJ might have access to a resource we can just piggyback on.
Yeah, I've definitely seen some templates out there.
Maybe NYSERDA or NYPA.
With regards to self-storage or storage in general, one of the things we don't really address is storage facilities. Maybe change that name to self-storage and storage facilities. I'm not sure that the one next to the town center is a self-storage facility versus some other type of storage, but we had the issue with whether or not outdoor storage was allowed there, parking at RV trailers and so on. We had an interpretation in the zoning board of appeals that it was not allowed. So it might just be good to tighten that up.
Yes, I remember that interpretation.
Yep.
And I think we often reference the no outdoor storage.
And on the flip side, should we address somewhere like seasonal storage, right? Like Funplex.
Right. And does storage include Connex storage containers, which I know this group has talked about previously.
Great point. Our friends at True Value.
And everywhere.
And Target.
And Target
And
and
Target.
Walmart and other places.
And firework tents and everywhere.
Would temporary storage fit under the banner of self-storage, or is that something separate because we're defining seasonal, we're defining maybe the location that, that it not be in the front yard for along public right of way.
I almost wonder if it's a new section with construction standards. You know, we had the issue where you know, the town center site was used as a construction yard in the middle of 9 and 20 for a year or two. Like I said, the old Tegan site's been quote unquote under construction for about 4 years since the building came down. And there's a couple others around town, just maybe all that just addressing as a temporary nature, temporary construction shall be temporary. After X months, you know, site shall be restored. And
I know I recently saw construction standards. Was it the section above?
There's a-
Construction maintenance
there you go.
signs. Yeah.
um, you know what, under 3.7.5A, it's
Mhm.
page 26, Anna.
Mhm.
I think it's buried in here. It's under excavations and soil mining,
Yeah,
but A02, in the event that building construction operation is arrested, it kind of gets into the premises shall be clear to any rubbish, building materials or unsightly accumulations. So, but excavation for construction of a building, we could just, and or demolition of an existing site. You know, that might be where that paragraph kind of addresses it. That once you start doing demo and or start construction, you got to finish or bring the site back to a stable situation.
okay.
I happen to look at 2-year-old roof trusses across the street from my house every single day. So I would love to see it get cleaned up.
Fair enough.
Mm.
They're probably in great shape though.
Oh yeah, they're gonna make for a wonderful roof structure after they rot for 2 years.
Any other thoughts on, I know we had some kind of recent discussion on the planning board and zoning board level or project review team level about our separation of existing and proposed gasoline stations. Any thoughts from anybody on that? Keep as is? Change.
I'm very much in favor of keeping F and G. Wait, no, yeah, F and G.
Fine
we had-
by that.
Same project, F and G applied to the same project recently.
I mean, in reality, I believe this is similar to the proposal next to Hannaford. That would be an area variance request, right? So they would have relief from the 1,200 feet, but they would have to seek an area variance.
I think the recent example we had as a use variance.
That's right, because it prohibited the use
Yeah,
on a
I
parcel.
think that was the interpretation of both Joe
Yeah.
and Bill, who are,
Yeah.
those that don't know, are
The
the
use was
attorneys.
prohibited
planning
within that
engineering.
distance.
Thank you. Thank you. That's right.
Yeah.
That's fine. Yep, that's fine. It's a higher standard.
So that's a higher standard. So some things that aren't included in this section as well, that to me would be included would be likely dispensary, cannabis dispensary. I think that's something that would be in the
Mhm.
standards for individual use, where we would, very similar to other portions of the section. Sorry to keep scrolling back and forth, but we would include something similar to 3.7.1C, where we say, you know, just copy the New York State standards for within a certain number of feet of a school or a certain number of feet of a house of worship. Couple other uses we've discussed that may or may not make sense under the standard for individual use to a new section would be things like distillery or kind of microbrew, those kinds of uses that we haven't really that we haven't had an opportunity to include previously. So they, might have specific or unique standards.
Yeah, we've had at least 3 applicants come in, I think, to propose at either at PRT for some kind of a brewery, right?
Yeah, I think the big issue with that, Anna, we stumbled upon was like the packaging. We have some discussions on packaging, whether or not it's just a restaurant or a retail use, and there was some discussion on packaging uses or on-site sales.
Right. And are they just serving like bags of chips? Are they serving actual food? Are trucks coming and picking up bulk amounts of, canned beer and selling it?
Yeah, it'd be good probably to have its own little section.
Yeah,
Well-
like
Oh, I was just gonna ask if that's gonna have its own section, would some kind of like, I'm trying to think of the right term, but like food preparation place, like someone that is doing like a chocolatier or like a canning place, like not beverages, but other canned goods, things like that. Do we have any specific regulation geared towards that, or would it make sense to go under this kind of like food beverage umbrella?
I guess it's what are the issues become kind of parking / outdoor noise and potentially any smells from the manufacturer of whatever product it is, whether it's chocolate or beer or whatever, should be addressed by maybe a special use permit or something like that is a way to tackle them. Because, we have typically a lot of the breweries just bring in food trucks. They don't do their own food. The Druthers site in Clifton Park is a great site to go look at if you haven't had a chance. They did a phenomenal job inside and outside overall site design on that site, but it's huge. So it's a little different than what we have, but that could be almost classified as a restaurant, except when you get into a lot of the outdoor entertainment, and could be noise for neighbors and such, just to be addressed. That's all.
Yeah, Chatham Brewery is a good example.
Mhm.
But
The
you're
other-
right. It's whatever, some owners come up with some wild ideas. I mean, what's now Salsa Latina, a previous owner in a different iteration of that business, wanted to have lawnmower racing. Yeah, propose that.
One other use I think, Anna, we'd like to have some guidance on is event venues, like
Right.
farm events,
Right.
breweries, wedding sometimes these farm barns get turned into wedding venues, and a dirt road that was set up for 3 or 4 trips a day wind up with 200-300 cars showing up to them. So, I know Sand Lakes had an issue with one. Matt Baumgartner's place, I forget the name of it, in Averill Park now, is very popular, but we just want to have some guidance on it.
June Farms, and then there was another proposed nearby, and I think it was, I don't know if it was shut down or not, but it's become a big problem.
I think it ended up went to court.
It was
and got
approved and shot down and approved and shot down. I don't know where it landed. Yeah. Was that Matt?
Oh, no, I was just saying, I think it eventually got approved after they went to court.
That's a question too, similar to kind of the brewery discussion is there an accessory use or an incidental use where, it's a farm, just a farm, maybe 5 months of the year, but the other months of the year, it's also used as an event space. So, that's something where I know we keep falling back on it, but a special use permit might be helpful in that situation where it's either an annual renewal or some kind of parameters that are specific to the use rather than vague, because it is hard to put limitations on an event barn, event space without maybe knowing exactly what's being proposed. General consideration.
Yeah, I think a special use permit's a good avenue for anything that's hard to define. Not everything, but it is a good tool.
Again, I'd like to see if MJ, if somebody I would imagine has some model language out there that we could build off of.
If I could make a segue for special use permit discussion, accessory dwelling units. This is an area of the specific use standards that is quite lengthy. It does get some use, but is also quite prescriptive, quite restrictive. Those of you who may not be familiar with, maybe take a quick look at it. So at the moment, we only allow accessory dwelling units or ADUs for either a direct relative of the owner of the primary home or a on-premises caretaker. So it's somewhat limiting. It does get used. I think it could get more use. We do have a limitation in that the special use permit is only for the property while it's in that person's hands. Once it's sold, it doesn't go with the property. You'd have to prove again that it was your family members. But I think this is it's something we've talked about. We've talked about tiny homes before with this group. We've talked about ADUs. So people have thoughts on these current regulations.
We haven't done one in a while. We were on a streak for a while where we did quite a few of them. I don't know if Buildings is still following up with them annually or biannually or every year and a half. I forget what the duration was. People were supposed to check back in to make sure it was still a family member. But we did receive a lot of pushback from neighbors and such when these went through to assure that they weren't going to become just apartments/rentals. So whichever way this goes, my preference is if we wanted to open it up to be kind of an apartment essentially on a single family property, that it's limited to certain zones maybe or districts in the town, not townwide. Our consensus, I think, our experience has been the majority of people don't mind it when it's a family member, an in-law or such. Once it becomes a non-relative, then there was some angst.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I know I've heard a lot of talk, especially in Troy, about tiny homes, and there seems to be a split of where people see it like, oh, this will be great. This is a new form of housing. I can put, a rental unit in my little backyard for it. And yeah, that can create a lot of issues between neighbors. And then I know there's an underlying anxiety with people that it won't actually help the affordability of housing, and anyone that is in need of an apartment, like the affordable space to them would be always shrinking, because if tiny homes and ACUs become the next big thing, then it's just shrinking the livable space for renters. So something to think about. Oh, and one thing I did realize with the on section B there, where it lays out use for office, retail, et cetera. I wasn't sure if something like studio, like an art studio, ceramic studio, something where someone is working like they would in an office, but they're not necessarily doing retail out of it. If that would still apply under office, or what kind of activity that might be.
Yeah, that's interesting. You bring that up. I think I've only ever seen interest in the A section. I wonder if Matt or Jeff, you've seen anyone come in for office or retail?
No, it would be a home occupation usually is what they'd come in under.
Right. So I guess in this scenario, it's just a separate structure.
I do know of an architecture firm that has half the building is a house and half is the office for like 15 people. Not in East Greenbush, but something I've seen.
Yeah, we have had a couple inquiries recently for home occupation uses. Generally, well, these two recent examples were in existing garages. So it's not a scenario of constructing a new building.
For what type of business?
One was, actually, I think they might have both been food related. One was catering, one was bakery. Any other thoughts on ADU? Jack, Tina? All right. Move on through waste recycling and disposal, marina. Is this marina section where we include the sidewalk requirement, or is that a different section that we've already discussed?
The Esplanade there?
Yes.
No, it's under somewhere else. I think it's
Okay.
specific use requirement under that zone. I think it comes up so infrequently, nobody's really dealt with it. We did have a marina proposed way back when we actually worked on it. So not bad to have.
Airports and heliports, get those all the time.
Yeah. It is pretty important to make sure that that probably stays in there, just because there is some rural
Sure.
areas of town that you can get some issues going.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, especially because part of this exercise is identifying things that were left out, right? And
Mhm.
it's important to have things that maybe don't happen often, but it's good to have it in there in the event it does come.
Right.
Plus, you'll incur the wrath of the town historian. Her father flew what is now Taylor Estates used to be an airport, and Bobby's father flew his own plane out of it. So keep the airports in there.
I forgot I flew out of that field when I was a kid.
Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. Never forget, because I ducked my head underneath the dashboard of the airplane. I was so scared.
I believe it.
That's why you stuck to designing streets, right?
That's it. That's why I stuck to roads. I stay on the ground.
Good point.
Funny. 3.714 and 3.715, we had a pretty substantial discussion on those when we were going through definition section. I'm happy to talk through some of that more. And I think probably we covered a lot of it in the definitions and separating those out. Any further thoughts?
I don't know, and ours were more of a definition issue. I'm not sure if these came
Right.
into play. Matt, have you guys dealt with them planning?
No, not
Not recently.
recently. I can think of.
You know, it might be a helpful suggestion to MJ is to link the two with reference or citations in each section to say, you know, see also section 3.7.15 and vice versa here to say, you know, see definitions, etc.
To reference the definition section in the.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we've spent a lot of time on those definitions and so it might be helpful.
Okay. And then the last one in here is swimming pools. From my personal experience, that's almost exclusively dealt with by the building codes department. I'm not sure that there's much to add there, except for that it go by New York State code.
Yeah, the only thing that sticks out there is the front yard thing. Right, like how are we define, not just for pools, but how do we define front yards on a corner lot? You know, it's one of those things
Yeah.
we get a ton of variant applications for, whether it's a shed or a pool or who knows what.
Yeah, we did ask
Yeah.
him to help with a diagram and a clarification of the front yards. I do see the benefits of the way it attempted to be set up in our code with 2 front yards, because, you know, there's a different set of neighbors on each street. So, you know, you want each street front to look decent. And then same thing with the side and rear, so it does come up.
Yeah, I think our current code essentially allows the applicant to choose which of their 2 front yards, if they're on a corner, which of their yard they'll consider to be front and which will be considered side.
Yeah, but
I agree,
I
a
think that's-
diagram would be very helpful.
Yeah, and I think that is only allowed during the subdivision approval. So all the old lots that are on corners, they're kind of stuck with 2 front yards. Which
You think
Is
it's easy
okay,
to
but-
pick, but I think there's only one house I've seen where the house actually faces the corner. Normally it's got a kind of a clear front and a clear side.
I can name 3 of them offhand where it's an issue.
Yeah.
Because, and the other
But I mean,
piece of that too, the other piece came up is down off of Mannix somewhere where, remember, Matt, the solar panels were kind of in a front yard, the front yard of Mannix Road, but it was the house's side yard. So I think Kevin just,
Yep.
yeah, went that way. The sketch will help. Fences, Anna, I don't know if we want to get into fence standards here, or do they go somewhere else, Matt?
But
we've
they're
got-
defined as a structure.
Yeah,
that
we've got
we're
a
referring
couple
to.
weird instances of fences showing up in a front yard that look completely
okay.
odd.
But I do know in some instances fences are referred to as a structure, which comes in kind of opposition to language about structures in general, and required setback.
Yeah, we should clean that up.
Yes.
Yep.
Seems like there's more discussion about it in the landscaping section. I'm not sure if it's specifically prohibited or,
Hmm. I
It's
mean,
defined as a structure in the zoning law.
right,
back in the definitions, or,
Yeah.
okay.
Right.
I mean, personally, I'd love to have a discussion, you know, I think if you need a privacy fence in your front yard, you bought the wrong property. And, you know, pretty much looks horrible when we see a privacy fence go up in a front yard.
I do. I'm not sure if there's more guidance from the building side on as far as height or aesthetics. Not something I've run into very much except for with the landscaping.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a whole lot on it in zoning law, not a fence.
Yeah, not a ton is coming up in this section.
Maybe it's something MJ's got some language we can help incorporate.
So the idea would be language that maybe goes in more in depth for aesthetic considerations within the front yard or height
Yeah,
considerations.
it's basically you're putting up a solid wall, a moat around your property in a front yard, not a look we're looking for in the town. I mean, if you put a privacy fence around your side yard or your rear yard, I get it. But you shouldn't be blocking off your whole house to the street and or sidewalk.
Make a note of that. Okay, so we left off at the end of the specific district standards. After that, on the list was parking, if that's something people want to get into. Home occupation, I don't think was on the list.
One thing there, Anna, I would like to address is landscape businesses.
Okay,
Is
yep,
property owners who
Talked about
run a landscape business need to figure out parking of their equipment and stuff. We've got the mess at the end of Iroquois and Elliott. That property's become trashed. And we've also had the one that was over off of Working Road by Luther, where it just becomes trailers of equipment parked all over the property. It becomes a mess.
Yeah,
That,
one of the-
we have it, I think, letter F, no outdoor display of goods or outdoor storage of equipment or materials used in a home occupation shall be permitted. Again,
Yeah,
maybe,
let me jump in here for a
Yeah.
second there. Kevin Hitchcock and I had a long conversation about this. Kevin's point is that there's probably 2 dozen young people in this town in their 20s trying to get started, trying to create their own business. And they're constantly getting in trouble with their neighbors because they are code violations and it doesn't look good. But Kevin also said that he has a tremendous amount of sympathy for what these guys are trying to do. Some of them are really legit small businesses trying to get off the ground. You can't visually pollute a neighborhood, but so he advocated for a little bit of flexibility with the landscaping businesses. I don't know that I agree, but I given his job in the town, I figured I'd put that on the table.
It would be great to define a certain period of time where that was allowable. For example, that property on the corner of Working and Luther, that's been at least probably close to 10 years at this point. They're clearly a successful business with the amount of equipment and things that they've got there. So at some point, there needs to be something implemented, whether it's, some arborvitae or something to conceal what's there. Or they need to find a more appropriate location to store that equipment, material, and things like that. But I agree with you 100%, Jack. I know you want to have some sympathy for somebody that's starting out, and so I would agree 100%. It's just maybe defining a certain period of time when something like that is acceptable, or to what extent. It's a fine line, I guess.
Yeah,
for an
the
example,
more
we
go ahead, Jeff.
I'm sorry, Jack. It's I was just gonna say we had somebody like that here in Huntswood, and it was one simple landscape trailer. It was always neat. That's the only piece of equipment. Their equipment was self-contained on that trailer, and the kid pulled it with his pickup truck when he needed it and took off, and that was the end of it. But as Josh mentioned, the property on Working was told they couldn't operate that business out of that property. So that's just a pure code violation that keeps on going. And this one at the end of Iroquois, where he's kind of hidden the trailer in the backyard, but now it's created a muddy mess in and out of the property. And you can't drive in and off the property without driving all over the grass, which turns into mud and so on. So it just snowballs.
Yeah, I don't think anybody would have any real major objection to a trailer, an enclosed trailer and perhaps even an open trailer with a couple of lawnmowers or something on it. It's just when it becomes excessive and you've got tractors and lawnmowers and parts of tractors and 50-gallon drums and all, there's just a lot of things, that wheelbarrows everywhere. And that's, when it becomes problematic and unsightly.
And Anna, maybe it's,
Yeah.
we regulate this with other trailers on properties, that it has to be on a paved, if it's going to be parked on the property, it has to be parked on a paved or prepared surface, something like that. And maybe also that it requires, maybe it's a special use permit, as Matt mentioned, and it's, it's got to be delineated on a site plan. And if my son wants to start a landscape business, well, I got to help him put a sketch together showing where we're going to park the trailer at the house and where it's going to be, and make sure our neighbors are happy with it, and gives us a way to get rid of it each year if it grows too big.
Yeah, and then there's a public hearing involved too, right? So you actually get the feedback from the neighbors.
Great point.
I will say currently, I think in many, if not all or most districts, home occupations do require a special use permit. So that's something we can bring in. I can do a quick search for trailers and see what comes up in the moment. Yeah, not in this section.
Is there, do we want to talk about, there are some occupations that aren't necessarily run out of the home, but the truck comes home every day and the truck is parked there nights and weekends. Is that something that we want to talk about? A box truck or a larger, truck.
I think that's addressed somewhere, somehow, Anna, maybe under commercial vehicle.
That was my instinct. I know it's certainly referenced that no commercial vehicle storage is allowed in some districts. I'm not sure if it'll pop up.
Well, you
in
should
the
be able-
right there.
section.
You have it right there. The garaging, storage, or parking of more than one light commercial vehicle on any premises is prohibited.
What kind of vehicles were you specifically referencing? Would it be like somebody who worked for, I don't know, like a Snap-on tool company or something like that, where they bring a truck home with them? Or was it more like a dog grooming business, maybe a mobile grooming business or something?
I think what you're talking about, like the Snap-on, the food trucks, that type of business.
So I guess this gets into Matt's issue. My definition is that would be a medium or heavy commercial vehicle, not a light commercial vehicle, which would be like our neighbor on Delahunt that brings home a Spectrum pickup truck and drives it back and forth to work every day. So that would be a light commercial vehicle, a pickup truck. But something like the Snap-ons maybe are medium or heavy duty, but I don't know that Kevin gets into that or has enough ammunition to define that.
Light is less than 1 ton capacity,
There you go.
carrying a permanently affixed sign. And commercial is more than 1 ton.
Is that in our definitions, Matt?
Yeah, it's heavy and light are the 2 definitions.
Okay, thank you.
I think heavy is the bigger problem, right?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah, my neighbor brings home an Amtrak pickup truck. Never even thought twice about it. It's fine.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. There's that difference where it might be, neighborhoods like ours where the driveways are short. It might be blocking the view it might be covering the sidewalk, that type of thing. If it's a big truck, might be parked on the road.
Well, this is going to come up with our, we haven't gotten there yet, I don't believe, but the food truck use is going to be part of that too. Does the food truck come back to the house every night? Because that's definitely a heavy vehicle.
Yeah, as far as light commercial vehicles, I think most DPW guys bring, something emblazoned with Town of East Greenbush on it home at night.
Yeah, I don't think we want to go anywhere near the light ones. That should be,
Yeah.
that's somebody's vehicle. But you know, I'm talking about the bigger one.
So this
Uh,
currently says that's prohibited in a residential district, right? Any heavy commercial vehicle within a residential district is prohibited.
except for farm vehicles.
Yeah. So
Sure.
we're,
Yeah.
is that good, Tina? Is that what you were looking for?
Yeah, I guess I was just looking to see that make sure that it was addressed in the event that there was an issue. You know, I do think, you know, that could come up.
To your point, Jeff, about food trucks, you know, we did have that, what we were calling like a pilot program or a demonstration program, that outlined specific uses for, or I'm sorry, specific number of permits for food trucks along 9 and 20, and within the town in general. After some interest in the early spring, so that program was around from the summer through the end of the calendar year. We did not have any applicants for permits. There was a couple interested parties, no one ended up doing it. So we certainly did a lot of research and spent a lot of time discussing it at multiple different board levels and meetings. But unfortunately, we didn't really come out with any more info on what we provided or what might be needed to going forward. So it is something we need to include, but we don't really have the specific parameters because we didn't find out what was used for or wasn't useful in the demonstration program.
But it's an issue that's not going away.
No.
Mhm.
It's gonna come back, so might as well deal with it up front.
I mean, do we want to do that now or do we want to just keep going and we'll come back to it, Jack? I know it was a lengthy issue and there's definitely some opinions on both sides of that.
Yeah, we don't have to do it right now.
And
I
the
just-
planning board did a great job coming up with recommendations. I mean, it was that they put a lot of work into that, so that foundational work is done.
Good.
And I think I lost track of it when we were in the specific district standard section, but a specific use standard section, you'd mentioned other kind of temporary uses such as firework tent. That's also a little bit of a hot button issue or one we've talked about seasonally, annually. Jack, take it away.
I offer a bounty every year. I will pay cash to the town employee or attorney who can get those things out of town. But so far I've been failed by everyone. And we still have them. I bullied 2 or 3 of them out of town, but we still have a couple who called my bluff. So, yeah, if somebody has any ideas on how to limit or eliminate those things, I would love to hear it.
Well, I do track the ones that don't abide by their site plan every year.
Very meticulous.
Right,
Good man, Matt. Good job. Yeah,
So for those of you that don't know, currently, I think last year we had 2 come through planning board. We had them follow the special use permit standards, I believe, or maybe it was just site plan modification.
Minor site plan modification.
Site plan modification, and then the approval resolution was very detailed as to the specific dates and times that they were allowed to store on site, sell, and then clean up afterwards. So, you know, allows for delivery of a trailer certain number of days before July 4th. Those
When they
kinds of
can put
details.
signs up, when they can actually operate, the hours of operation, stuff like that.
Okay, anything else on home occupation specific use standards.
Not for me.
This, I think we could certainly discuss, but my instinct is to scroll past the residential cluster development section. I think partially because it will be adjusted by the nature of the residential buffer being changed. Obviously, these districts inclusions will be changed. We can certainly discuss, but I think that is a little bit more in line with the area and bulk discussion.
The only piece I'd like to have MJ or whoever's gonna look at this section consider is in G right there.
Yep.
An open space area totaling not less than 25%. Does that need to be useful open space? Meaning a field
So-
where you can throw a frisbee and a dog can run, or can it just be wooded area? Can, you know,
Yeah,
I think
We
we
do
say
have-
swampland, but
right.
Yeah.
Right, it does have to be buildable, meaning it's not the land that you can't use because the slopes are too high or it's all wetland. Matt could probably speak to it a little bit more. The one I'm familiar with, portion of it is ended up kind of being used or intended to be used by future residents of the development. I don't believe we required it, but there is language to recommend it as a part of the amenities. I think this section H kind of ties into that a little bit more.
Harvard Court actually proposed some decent space, if I'm remembering correctly.
okay, good. So it's worked well, Matt.
But there's been others where, you know, we didn't. It's not land that can necessarily be used easily.
Yeah.
Also, should that 10% buildable, should the buildable part be defined better? I mean, you get someone who wants to just argue, they're going to argue that they can build on anything.
True.
I mean, we have a project right now on a pretty severe slope, a 4-lot subdivision. Still trying to
Yeah.
build on it.
Yeah, I guess I would ask, the engineers and those in the construction side if, I mean, would there really be a easy design standard for what is buildable land or not? I mean, it does seem like it probably depends on the type of construction, type of use. I'm wondering if there's an easy way to define it or if it might become too detailed.
I think almost flip it language wise, like Matt was mentioning, at least 10% of the site, at least 10% of the open space must be land not otherwise prohibited by the current code from construction. Not just almost like a catch-all statement. So the steep slopes are out, wetlands are out, any buffer areas are out. Does that work for you, Matt?
Yeah, just something that's, just always good to have something that's easier to point to when you're going back and forth with a developer.
Mhm.
I mean, we went through Covered Bridge, we had, even though it wasn't a cluster, we had kind of had that argument.
Okay. Sexually oriented businesses. We talked a lot about that in our definitions discussion,
MJ's
With
redoing
our-
the whole section, right?
our many definitions. So I think probably next on the list would be parking. That sounds good to everybody.
Oh, I did have a quick comment, sorry,
Yeah.
about the, what were we just on, sorry, back, with the residential cluster development at the very end, section K of that. There is a line about to assist the planning board in this regard, development plans must include aerial photos or mapping of the property. And that's all about the provide suitable buffer area and screening purposes. I was wondering if this would be a great opportunity to insert to assist the planning board and conservation advisory council.
Yes.
You know.
I wondered if that's where you were going.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think it's a great idea.
Yeah. Just gotta get us in there somehow. I know obviously the CAC, the role is purely advisory, but be good to point out that that those plans would be going to multiple boards in that case.
Yeah, absolutely.
I like,
And could include site visits, specifically tagging and flagging and trees to be kept
Yes.
from recent experience. Great, thank you.
Do we get into what is or is not allowed in the setbacks and or buffer areas? Like is a parking allowed to encroach into the setbacks?
My interpretation would be on a new construction, new site plan, no. That would require a variance. That would be my interpretation.
Matt, are you familiar with that? Is that locked down?
Good question. I don't know that it is.
Is that something people have pushed back against in your experience from needing a variance for?
I don't think it's ever come in for a variance. I think I've seen people parking within their setbacks.
Hmm,
Maybe it's just older sites.
that would be my guess, just thinking about site plans. You know, typically for a design professional
I think-
now, or engineer, or surveyor would include the setbacks of the restriction right on the site plan. So it's very clear when parking or other things kind of intrude on that setback.
I don't know. I feel like they do it for the building, not for the parking.
Okay. I'm specifically
I'm
thinking about
I'm
Chili
hung up on
Salon,
Yeah.
because I think it got closed and then they adjusted it, so they wouldn't need to have a variance. But that's something we could maybe shoot to Joe Slater and Bill Hesney too, and just,
Yeah, I guess
Get
the
their opinion on
definition
it.
of setback is the minimum horizontal distance from the property line to any structure, roadway, parking area, accessory building, or other such improvement on a lot, except necessary driveways. So you can build a driveway in the setback, which I'm not sure we want to keep allowing or not.
well, there's no setback is universal. There's no allowance for ingress egress.
Is that perpendicular across the setback, but not parallel? That's the only thing, is somebody running up parallel, like a side yard setback, and they build the driveway 2 feet off the property line with a 5-foot
Mhm.
setback.
Good point.
Yeah, I think that's the only one we've seen kind of maybe still be a loophole.
I mean, you're
Yeah,
right.
for
I don't think
me-
I don't remember a variance for parking like that.
But I have seen driveways run up along, like a sideline.
Sure.
Yeah,
And part of it might be the setback, if it's a 5 or 8 foot setback, but part of it wouldn't be. Okay,
yeah, to cut across the frontage to get onto your property, obviously you have to build across the setback, but
right.
not
Very well
along it.
questioned.
Okay.
Or sometimes you see people pave on the far end of their property to store their equipment or their heavy duty truck.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yep.
Yeah, I think just tightening up that the setback is intended to be undeveloped.
So we're talking about parking a little bit. I'm not sure, those of you looking at my shared screen, if you are seeing the full laptop, but I would like to point out that the time is not accurate on this work laptop. It is 8:15. Generally, we've kept the meetings to a good to 2 hours, so I want to wrap up the parking conversation, but I also want to leave time to discuss Andres's prompt for the field visit support table that he provided, and then if there's any more discussion about doing a potential site visit or field visit, if you want to think about. So the idea of the field visit would be to look at existing neighborhoods in East Greenbush, in and around East Greenbush, and see what Vulcan area standards look like in practice. You know, what does a 15-foot setback look like? What does a 50-foot? What does 2 dwelling units per acre look like versus 1 versus 12? To open it up to thoughts on that, if you want to talk more about parking or field visit.
I would really benefit from that kind of field visit. I would really encourage that.
I think anytime you can see something in real life, right?
Yeah.
Going from 2D to 3D helps a lot.
I think the committee had previously talked about organizing something for a Saturday, whether you want to do that individually or together. Jack previously said I didn't have to go.
Did I? Hmm,
I'm happy to attend, maybe.
I don't remember that.
Can certainly help organize.
It would be nice to do it as a group, just to, promote discussion and prompt discussion while we're there making observations.
Yep, that's right.
I think there's, maybe some key neighborhoods like the new not crisscrossing, the new one across from the soccer fields.
Wyatt Circle.
Wide Circle, thank you. How that one went in. I think those are less than a 1/3 acre lots. I forget, but to have some kind of standards, that's what this is. We talked about Tina's kind of almost the historic neighborhood. I'd like everyone to drive down Huntswood Lane and itself, you can see what a large front yard setback does for the feel of the neighborhood.
Is that 50, Jeff, or is it more?
I think it's at least 50, so I'd have to check.
Just trying to
Yeah.
get sympathy for those trusses.
Sympathy for what's that?
The trusses.
Those trusses across from your house.
Oh, no, I won't show those. I like my street besides those. But I think I have a 25-foot setback. I think we pushed our house all the way up against the front setback,
So
yeah.
at Andres's table, he lays out 2 different references for a 50-foot setback. The first one is the agriculture open space, which has a minimum lot size of 5 acres. And he references southern half of 9J, and then down to 2 acres. You know what? I can pull this map up or this list up. Hold on 1 second. That's usually easier than reading out loud.
Maybe it's even worthwhile to drive through an older apartment complex and see how they age, right? Or just see the designs of them. Those are coming up a lot.
Absolutely.
Couple gas stations, look at their signage.
So this was this reference that they put together quickly. And I think probably to this, we could add, Wyatt Circle is one of the newer developments. I could confirm the, density, which is, you know, basically the minimum lot, and then the front yard setback.
I know Springhurst was a PDD, but that seems to be one of the tighter, newer subdivisions also. You know,
Yeah, those got to be quarter acre lots or less, right?
yeah, I'm not sure. So a quarter, a third, and not much difference really, so. You don't think there is anyway, but be curious.
Right.
You know, the other neighborhood that is interesting is Governor Square
Mm-hmm.
and probably Plaza View also. You know, I've looked into Plaza View is one of the older, newer subdivisions in town, and it's really held up well over time.
It's held up, yeah, better than Governor Square, I think.
Hmm. Yeah, Governor Square has
A
some
little bit.
single family and some multi-units in the back, multifamily.
Plaza View has a really, really strong homeowners association.
Hmm.
They stay
Okay.
very organized. There are a lot of seniors in that neighborhood who have retired from very, very significant jobs. And they run the place well.
Maybe that's it, because it's held up really well in there.
Yeah, yeah.
You can or can't see, I could point you to the, chat. For a public comment on, site visit suggestion. But also just, maybe we can re-forward, I can make a note to myself to re-forward, but Jeff previously sent out, I think a combined PDF of multifamily in the area.
Yeah.
That showed density unit per acre. I think there were quite a few developments in North Greenbush. Or just kind of the general Rensselaer County, if I'm remembering correctly, so, to help a little bit more with the multifamily side.
Yeah, it's funny because there is a push towards higher density, but there can be some really ugly higher density. There could be some well done higher density too. So it's trying to figure out how do you wind up with good higher density and not bad. Anna, this is a little bit of an aside, but we're on that apartment topic too, is do we have any expiration towards a normal site plan approval? Like at one point, Tina, I think you had asked Tony Manfredi to pull this way back in the day while Town Center was first being proposed, but we had a lot of apartments that were approved at one point in time, including, I think, what was called the Villages of East Greenbush, where the Hampton Inn is down below when Lowe's was supposed to go down there, but they had approved apartments. And I know PDDs
There's-
expired, they didn't start them, but Patel, I guess, would essentially have started his PDD because the Hampton Inn's built. So are his apartments down there still approved, and for how long do we leave these approvals?
There's a sunset clause. I started this when I worked in the town. There's a sunset clause for site plans and PDDs. I sent it to Joe Slater and Anna recently. I found it through a Google search. I found the state law submission, or the town law submission rather.
Can we roll that into this document update?
Yeah, there's two separate local laws, and I know I forwarded them to MJ. I'll make another note.
Great.
There's one specifically for PDD and one specifically for, site plan approval, yeah.
Okay, excellent. And the
Yeah, that was
PDD
very
one, that,
interesting.
yeah, did that address like Patel? Because that that PDD started, so now is he re-grandfathered forever, or does that expire again?
I know right now,
Yeah.
he thinks he has that approval.
Okay,
The project thinks that, that they think they have the whole thing approved. And you're right, they've put a significant foot in. Although it's been a while.
been a long time, yeah.
Yeah, it really has.
But it may be
I-
worth reconsidering that, okay, your PDD was locked in, but if you don't do anything else within X number of years, it expires again.
Yeah. That would be
Yeah, I think
good.
there were specific parameters on pulling a building permit and acting on it. And then I think there was termination after that as well. We'll resend those out to the group and MJ too, just so you can take a look at it.
Thank you.
Yep.
And then the other one that I'd like guidance from MJ on is pre-existing non-conforming lots.
Mhm.
You know, we're left with a lot of these micro lots from back in the World War II subdivision era day.
Yep.
That aren't necessarily buildable, although our language may say otherwise.
So would we be looking for guidance on how to provide variances or whether
That-
to kind of exclude them from being buildable or?
I think there's a
Maybe that's-
strengthening. What would be ideal is a strengthening that, you know, it is no longer a buildable lot if it was ever adjacent to another lot, but legal would have to get involved too, because if somebody's sitting on a 60 by 100-foot lot, or it'd be smaller than that, probably 30 by 100, and we tell them it's not buildable, is that a seizure of their land without compensation? I don't know.
That is a big question.
Yeah. Because that has come up and I envision will continue to come up.
Okay.
Anna, we should start wrapping up.
Agreed. My dog's coming over to tell me the same thing. So it is 8:25. We're looking at the field visit support table. I'm happy to send out, some kind of online, send out a poll, available times. I think previously we'd spitballed on Saturdays. It looks like maybe this Saturday will be a little warmer. There might still be some snow on the ground. We can kind of plan that offline, or if anyone has a suggestion, feel free to throw it out right now.
I also feel, just for clarity, I'll throw it out to the group, but my opinion is there's no quorum involved and it's kind of a workshop trip that we don't have to worry about public involvement on that.
I did want to bring that up. Yeah. Obviously just having 2 town board members present, not a question of quorum, and then obviously only 1 member each of the PB and ZBA.
Okay. We're good?
Okay, so I will be sending out some follow-up internally to the zoning update committee. I'll include you all. I'll try to kind of come up with a doc, our highlights of our comments and edits. We will be sending, and by we I mean Andres, reminder out for our next official public meeting, which will be Monday, February 6th at 6:30 in person, barring any big storm.
Yeah.
But we're planning on in person in the community room in town hall, as our previous meetings will be, and there'll be an agenda posted in advance. Any
Excellent.
other?
Thank you, everybody, for accommodating your schedules. This was hard to pull together, but Anna persisted, so I think it was worth doing.
Happy to not be on the road. Thank you. Been hearing a lot of salt going by, so
All
thank
right.
you, everybody.
Good night.
Excellent. Good night. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a great night.
Bye, everyone.